Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Ballabha Girivanadhari Gopi Jana Ballabha Girivanadhari Gopi Jana Ballabha Girivanadhari Ballabha Girivanadhari Yasoda Nandana Braja Janaranjana Yasoda Nandana Braja Janaranjana Yasoda Nandana Braja Janaranjana Nandana Braja Janaranjana Yamuna Tira Bonachari Yamuna Tira Bonachari Yamuna Tira Bonachari Tira Bonachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Jaya Prabhupada Prabhupada Srila Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Jayam Vishnu Pad Paramahamsa Parivakacharya Astadata Tata Sisi Mad Abhay Charna Arvinda Bhakti Vedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai Jayam Vishnu Pad Paramahamsa Parivakacharya Astadata Tata Sisi Mad Shri Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai Shishi Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinata Shyamakunda Radhakunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai Sri Vrindavandam Ki Jai Sri Maya Purdam Ki Jai Tulasi Devi Bhakti Devi Ki Jai Samaveda Bhakti Vrinda Ki Jai Sri Harinam Sankirtana Ki Jai All glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to Shri Guru and Shri Garanga, all glories to Shri Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Readings from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 14, Text number 13. Purapita no Bhagavan Daksho duhitrir vatsala Daksho duhitri vatsala Kamvinita varam vatsa Kamvinita varam vatsa Icha prichatana pratak Icha Prichaktana Pritak. Someone else? Gentlemen? Purapita no Bhagavan Daksho Dihitri Vatsala Kamrinita Varam Vatsa Hita Vichana Pritak. Somebody else? Have a go. Purapita no Bhagavan Daksho Duhiriti Vatsalaha Kamvinita Varam Vatsa Icha Prichana Pritak. Ladies? Somebody else? Anybody else? Pura, in days long ago. Pita, Father. Na, our. Bhagavan, the most opulent. Daksha, Daksha. Duhitir Vatsala, affectionate to his daughters. Come, unto whom? Vinita, you want to accept. Varam, your husband. Vatsaha, O my children. Iti, thus. Aprichata, inquired. Na, us. Pritak, separately. Translation. In days long ago, our father, the most opulent Daksha, who was affectionate to his daughters, asked each of us separately whom we would prefer to select as our husband. Please repeat. In days long ago, our father, the most opulent Daksha, who was affectionate to his daughters, asked each of us separately whom we would prefer to select as our husband. Purport. It appears from this verse that free selection of a husband was allowed by the father, but not by free association. The daughters were asked separately to submit their selection of a husband who was famous for his acts and personality. The ultimate selection depended on the choice of the father. So who was here yesterday and read the verse from yesterday? Do you know what's happening in this story? I haven't had a chance to review it. Who can fill us in? Nobody can remember. I will read the verse before it. That may help us a little bit to remember. This is verse 12. A woman is honored in the world by the benediction of her husband, and a husband like you will become famous by having children because you are meant for the expansion of living entities. Purport. According to Rishabdeva, one should not become a father or mother unless one is confident that he can beget children whom he can deliver from the clutches of birth and death. Human life is the only opportunity to get out of the material scene, which is full of the miseries of birth, death, old age, and diseases. Every human being should be given the opportunity to take advantage of his human form of life, and a father like Kasyapa is supposed to beget good children for the purpose of liberation. So I will comment a little bit on this, and certainly this is a moment to discuss and have questions because it's a very important topic. Regardless of the story, it's bringing up this important topic about inviting elevated souls into our families and into our communities through the process of marriage and conceiving children. Generally, we have this notion, at least we see this in the material context, where, people randomly have children, sex life indiscriminately with different sorts of people, different sorts of circumstances, perhaps in a drunk state, perhaps in an intoxicated state, not being aware that the consciousness at the moment of conception is what actually invites the soul into the womb. So this verse is talking a little bit about how the duty of a husband and a wife is to actually conceive children according to religious principles. Why? Because the kind of children that you have and how you take care of them is either going to be a benefit to society, a service to society, because you're inviting souls who are very evolved and they are entering into the human species in order to be way showers or light workers. That's another word for it. But personalities who specifically descend to this human form of life in order to benefit human society. So it's a huge responsibility, this idea of conceiving children. And we see so often that people have children who end up becoming their enemies. We have that. Sometimes family members are enemies from a previous lifetime who are taking birth in our family because we have some unfinished business we haven't navigated. So it's a really important service to be conscious of what you're doing when you're engaging in having children. And not only that, once you have children, once you the consciousness invites a soul there, and you go through the entire 10 months giving birth in the womb, this is an enormous responsibility also. Even Western scientists have discovered that the nervous system of the mother, the consciousness of the mother, while she is carrying an embryo, is transferred to the child in the sense that if she has experienced or is experiencing trauma, if she's anxious, if she's being emotionally abused or neglected, the child will also inherit through the nervous system that level of consciousness. And often they will, at the time of birth and beyond, they will have the same kinds of anxieties and trauma symptoms as their mother. Not only the mother, they trace it back to grandmother. So that consciousness is being traveled through from the grandmother's nervous system to the mother's nervous system to the child in the womb. So 3 generations. And they've discovered, people who study this sort of thing have discovered that children who are 3rd generation from Holocaust, not survivors, but grandparents who have been killed in these concentration camps and have been traumatized, or they have 3rd generation down through that nervous system. The children have the same kind of trauma symptoms as people who were in the concentration camps. That's how important. So I'm telling you this because in the Krishna consciousness philosophy, the idea of protecting women, particularly at childbearing years, is super important because if a woman is unnecessarily startled, upset, that affects the child. The opposite is also true. If a woman is Krishna conscious, and during the time when the child is in the womb, she's chanting and hearing, the child's also benefiting right from the womb. And we have examples of that in the sense of, I believe, Prahlad Maharaj, his mother Kayadu. She was captured by the demon race, and she was actually, Hiranyakasipu's wife, but during the battle of Hiranyaksha and Hiranyakasipu, somehow or other she was captured by the demigods, and they were going to kill her, but I believe it was Narada Muni had said, no, she's has a child in her womb. We will take her back to my ashram, and we will give her the wisdom of the Vedic text. So Narada Muni, during her pregnancy, was reading to her and teaching her about spiritual life. And when her baby was born, he became, right from the moment of his birth, he was a pure devotee of Krishna, who we worship as Prahlad Maharaj. So it's a very, very sensitive time, this transition from before birth to birth and beyond. And those first moments, even in the womb, is a moment to start nurturing in a child's consciousness, Krishna consciousness. So I believe this whole chapter is about Kasyapa Muni and Diti, and conceiving a child in perhaps an inauspicious time, and perhaps not with the correct consciousness, although it's pious that at least you're having children with your lawful spouse. And then you had Hiranyakasipu and Hiranyaksha take birth because it was not in a pristine consciousness, in the sense of being conscious that we are inviting pure devotees to come into our home and our community, and they are prayed for, they are wanted children. Another interesting point around this is that Srila Prabhupada talked about why we have criminality. And he said that children who are unwanted are what actually contributes to people becoming criminals. And that is because if you have children that you don't want, generally, you do not educate them, you do not take care of their health, the children do not feel cared for, they do not feel loved. And so in their yearning for love and belonging, they will go to gangs and other kinds of maybe even intoxication in order to somehow meet this longing for love and belonging. And so I've studied this as a person who works with prisoners in the ISKCON prison ministry. Every single one of them has childhood trauma, parents who have abandoned them, or they were drug addicts or something, or they were physically abused, and often sexually abused. And so when another prisoner comes in, when you come into the prison house, and of course everybody wants to know, what are you here for? Were you a murderer? What was the reason you come? If they find out that you are being convicted for abuse of children, pretty much you'll get killed by the other prisoners, because they also are suffering this sort of wound of being abused as children. So this is very instructive. It's not a random thing. Inviting children into this world is a huge responsibility, and doesn't stop with just the sexual act. Is a whole process from the time the child is conceived to making sure that mother is getting the food that she needs. Even in the Bhagavatam, it discusses how when a mother is eating lots of chili and heavy spices, how it burns the baby's body. And so I remember Srila Prabhupada instructing some of our younger women who are pregnant and not to eat certain spices because it causes suffering to the baby. I remember when I was living in Vrindavan in 1976, and there was a pregnant woman who, in the old days, Prabhupada would be sitting on the Vyasasana, and we'd all march up and offer our obeisances, just like we do today. And Prabhupada said to this pregnant woman, "Don't bow down. Don't offer your obeisances." And he said it hurts the child that you're bowing down and you're like mashing. So he told the women, don't offer obeisances when you're pregnant that way, particularly because your womb is the place where you are mashing. You're kind of mashing in this tight squeeze for a child. So many instructions. So the verse today, it kind of is going beyond this verse from yesterday. In days long ago, our father, the most opulent Daksha, who was affectionate to his daughters, asked each of us separately whom we would prefer to select as our husband. It appears from this verse that free selection of a husband was allowed by the father, but not by free association. The daughters were asked separately to submit their selection of a husband who was famous for his acts and personality. The ultimate selection depended on the choice of the father. Well, this is the idea behind arranged marriages, that there is, and I've talked to many Indian ladies who have had arranged marriages, and I had an arranged marriage, which I'll talk about in just a moment. But it's not that you're just forced to marry someone. There's a period of association. The parents may scope out whether and each family is scoping out the character of the proposed wife or the proposed husband to be, and seeing what their reputation is, what their character is. Are they responsible? Particularly the husbands, are they capable of providing for their wife in some way? That means financially protecting and providing, and so once they select, you may shop around. I've seen in India when I was living there, people post do horoscopes to make sure there's a compatibility, and then if it looks like the family, because you're not just marrying the person, you're marrying the family as well, then they will bring the two together in some kind of meeting. Kind of awkward, you got both families sitting there on the couch, and then you have the boy and girl who are meeting each other for the first time, and the way it works is the girl comes in with some cookies and some snacks and something, and it's kind of a weird, like, shopping thing, being able to see her, how she's doing, and then they may, if it looks like there's some chemistry, they may go in the next room while the family members are sitting, chitty-chatting, and they're talking. And you don't have a lot of privacy there, but there's enough time to, feel it out, to see if that's something, you have some kind of chemistry. And then after they go away, the families go away, and then, of course, each family is saying to the girl or the boy that's a prospective marriage partner is like, okay, what do you think of that guy? What do you think of this guy? And, of course, the girl can say at this time, well, not so much, But if there's any interest then in both of them, then they have another couple of meetings. They kind of do that for a while until they decide whether this is going to be a match or not. So it's not just that you're freely, like today, people sort of randomly hook up with this one and that one, then they decide they don't like them, and then maybe they're pregnant already, but then they just don't like them anymore, and the woman is stuck with kids that are unwanted and no one to take care of them. So it's very responsible, even today, trying to figure out, how do you give the best chance to a child by having parents who are responsible. And there was one more point about that with the conversations. The good news about this, which sounds kind of, for Western imagination, sounds really childish and kind of awkward, but the good part of arranged marriages is, in this system, that you can always, you don't have to now break up. Like in the West, you may have to say to the person that you've hooked up with, well, yeah, I've changed my mind. And you've had maybe a year or two of very intimate contact, and now it's a real grief, and it's kind of awkward and embarrassing. But it's much easier if the parents are just saying, no, we're not interested, and then you don't have to go through the pain of breaking up with somebody that you have spent a lot of time trying to get to know. In my case, I came to the Hare Krishna movement and not, God, I had no idea. I had decided by the time I joined the Hare Krishna movement, I was pretty done. I didn't want to marry at all. I'd had so many boyfriends from the time I was 13, that I was like, I'm done. And, I joined the movement when I was, about 20. And the downside is I happened to be kind of I guess I was an attractive young girl. I guess so. You wouldn't tell that from now I'm 70, but I guess I was pretty agitating. We all lived in a house. There were 50 of us living in a tiny house all together, sleeping on the steps and in sleeping bags, and the women slept in a room about the size of, half the size of this room. We'd have 20 women like sardines, and then the men would have 20 men and sardines living out of cardboard boxes. And so I, just similar to this, there were 3 guys. The temple president thought, well, GBC thought, well, okay, these are 3 guys, you know, that you could marry. So you pick one. You pick somebody. And the reason I picked my husband because he was tall enough. I had no idea, no criteria, you know. The other 2 guys were short. And one of them was the Pujari. The other one was the temple president of Hamburg. And my husband was the temple president of Heidelberg. I also picked him because he was, when I came, I didn't speak German. And he would sit in a class like this and speak English when nobody else could understand, but out of respect for the fact that I couldn't speak German. So he would do the lecture in English. And so I appreciated that. But I had not spoken to him at all. And on Friday, the temple, I guess it was the GBC and his wife, said, okay, so now on Friday, to call your parents, I'm in Heidelberg, call your parents and tell them, invite them to your wedding on Sunday. That was how, well, that's how we did it. You know, it's like, okay, well, all right. And so I had spoken to my husband the first time on Saturday. It was a very brief conversation. And we were so crazy, honestly. The only thing he said to me was, from now on, you don't have to ask anybody else for getting your questions answered. You can come to me. And that was our first and last conversation. And then we got married on Sunday. And my father, he got on a plane, completely freaked out, came on the plane to come to my wedding. And hoping, I guess, I wouldn't get married and bring me home. I'm sure he thought I was brainwashed completely. Probably was. And so my husband picked him up at the airport, but my husband himself was so freaked out and nervous that he didn't tell my father that I'm the one who's marrying your daughter. They're riding in the VW bus together by themselves. And my husband's so nervous he can't find the way back to the temple, although he lives. And my father was the one who had to navigate the way back. So it was so odd. But it was, I got to choose. It wasn't, in the arranged marriage, it wasn't quite like the Indian system. We didn't know how to do stuff right. You know, we were trying to pretend or imitate Indian culture, which we didn't have enough information about. But it was a working relationship, and Prabhupada was very, he wasn't so keen on a lot of the social Hindu procedures. His idea was that if husband and wife are devotees, then they will get along. If you both love Krishna and you make Krishna the center of your relationship, then it will work out. Didn't always happen like that in our history. We won't talk about that right now, but we had a lot of disasters with the arranged marriage. But, thankfully, somehow or other I survived it, and I'm here to tell the tale. So let me just read the verse after this and see if there's any nectar coming out of that one, and then we can go to questions and discuss. The next verse is, and whoever's giving class tomorrow, they'll elaborate on it, but our well-wishing father Daksha, after knowing our intentions, handed over 13 of his daughters unto you, and since then we have all been faithful. Generally, the daughters were too shy to express their opinions before their father, but the father would accept the daughter's intentions through someone else, such as a grandmother, to whom the grandchildren had free access. King Daksha collected the opinions of his daughters and thus handed over 13 to Kasyapa. Every one of Diti's sisters was a mother of children, and therefore, since she was equally faithful to the same husband, why should she remain without children? So that's just a I'm sure there's going to be more about that, in terms of having multiple wives. That's a kind of a new concept. In America, you have Mormons who have lots of wives, and there's different experiences. Sometimes it becomes abusive, and sometimes the women like to have co-wives because they share the work. I don't know how that would be, being in a marriage and having to compete in your relationship with 13 people. I'm not sure I'd like that very much. So I won't go too much into this because I think the person coming behind me tomorrow will talk. And I'm going to stop here and invite any questions or reflections as you heard all of what we just talked. This is one of these unprepared, spontaneous classes. But any thoughts that came up as you heard this verse or heard any of my reflections that you resonate with? Maybe you have a different experience or something to add? Yeah. I bet. Yeah.
I'm wondering what your advice would be to young people these days.
What would be my advice?
Which way to go?
Which way to go in terms of what?
Choosing a partner.
Yeah, very carefully. Very carefully. I think what our second generation, third generation are doing now is important to have a period of association. And I think that new couples really need to sit, maybe even with a third person, and decide what their values are. Do they have shared values? What are they imagining life together will be? Sometimes that conversation is never had about whether, how you might raise your children, the kind of work you're going to do to support your family. How are you going to do that together? Sometimes that conversation never happens, and then people are in a marriage and they're like, "Oh, I thought you. Those conversations need to happen first." When the honeymoon's over, and that's over pretty quick, that now you're faced with the reality of living with someone that you haven't gotten to know at all. So I would recommend some serious dialogue about what your vision is, and your goals of life are, your services. I think that people who share the same passion in their occupation probably have the best time being compatible. Even if you're not an ISKCON devotee, what I've observed is that if, for example, if you are passionate about maybe you're a musician, it could be very helpful to have a wife or share that kind of work. Or from, like, I've seen myself as a person who has taken the path of chaplaincy and pastoral care. You need to have somebody who knows that discipline and language to share the conversation around, and I think that could be very connecting. So that's my personal experience. My husband and I both were passionate about Prabhupada. We both came to the movement as preachers, that kind of thing, and I think that's what helped us survive for so long, is that we were work partners. We never lived together. My husband and I never, ever shared a home. I would say that's probably not a good thing, but anyway, it helped me sit here today, pretty much, and be still in ISKCON, although I'm pretty much a woman who's by herself. But at 70, that's kind of a normal thing, family. Marriage sort of runs its course, and at a certain point, you're really alone, whether you're married or not. In the end, as you get older, you're alone. Somebody dies, gets cancer, or divorces you or leaves you. So all of that training in terms of working together in Krishna consciousness makes it possible for me to be able to be here today, because I didn't probably have all those creature comforts and false securities that sometimes people get, thinking, okay, now I'm comfortable, and now you're fighting the whole world to try and keep change from happening. So I think it's important for young couples to really understand that marriage is not forever. It's a stage. It's not fully sustainable. Husband and wife cannot protect you from calamity. That's an illusion. If you have children, there's no way you can protect them. You can try, but Prabhupada says that, you cannot prevent them. If a death is there or disease is there, you may not be able to, as much as you'd like to protect them, you cannot. But I think that the awareness of the fragility of life is important for new couples to keep in mind. It's not going to solve all your problems. You're still you in a body. You still take your karma with you in marriage or out of marriage. You're still there. And stay really close to the path. Chanting is super important for survival in marriage, and a good sense of humor. Any other thoughts from other married people? What would you say as the formula? And you've got some people who are getting ready to be married, thinking about it. Any thoughts? Did I scare you all too badly? Yeah, Vaishnavi. Here she comes. Give us your wisdom.
Thank you for the class. Growing up in an Indian family, what you mentioned about association and the parents arranging or relative arranging, that was there in my observation. And also I saw that it wasn't a long association, 6 months max maybe, because as Prabhupada says, butter and fire. And and I have a question as well. You mentioned about, Prabhupada mentions that it's a very heavy responsibility to have children. Maybe my small understanding, I feel like it's not really taken that seriously, that it is a heavy responsibility. You really need to step up and be Krishna conscious in order to have children. Even materially speaking, you don't really see that.
Yeah.
Having children for the sake of having children, and I realized also wanting children to enjoy that young age and then to deal with the teenagers and all that. To understand the full impact of having a child, it's quite heavy and quite a scary responsibility.
Yeah, is that a question?
Yeah, it's kind of a question of why is it that that people still, even after hearing that it's a heavy responsibility, are not really taking it that seriously.
Well, what does it say in Bhagavad Gita? Poison in the beginning, nectar in the end is the mode of goodness. Poison in the nectar in the beginning, poison in the end. So people are chasing, depending on what mode they're in, they're looking for something that's going to give them perhaps pleasure in the sense of wanting to create something. It's new, but like everything new, the kids are cute when they're little. I don't know, if you've had a baby boy, it's really no sleeping and no eating. It's not so much fun. It's a lot of work. A lot of poopy diapers, and no sleeping, and but it has been for me a good training in putting someone else first. It's kind of purifying also. If you're attracted to the opposite sex for sense pleasure, and you do have kids and you stick with it, it does very much purify you in the sense of learning how to regulate and be responsible for another living being, be the teacher. When you have kids, you also know, if you're at all conscious, that whatever you put out, whatever example you have, they're going to follow. Prabhupada said that children will just do what they see the parents do. So don't do as I, sometimes parents say, don't do as I say, don't do as I do as I say. That doesn't work. You have to actually model what you're trying to teach. That was Lord Chaitanya's thing. But I don't know why people don't take it more seriously. I think people just don't think. And I'm not sure I was aware until I had kids what a huge responsibility that is. It's just, you're not just responsible for them spiritually, you are responsible for their education right on through until they are able to take care of themselves. So you're obliged to give them enough education that they can figure out how are they going to take care of themselves, even financially. Education is huge. And that's not just done at the age of 5. We sent our kids to Gurukul at 5 thinking, okay, Prabhupada had advocated that your kids could go to Gurukul and the parents then would be free to preach, and which is what we did. But the fallout of that with my children is that they. I have two different sons with two different experiences, but at least in the earlier generations, they felt abandoned. They didn't feel cared for. The people who were teaching in the Gurukul were not themselves trained, so they were kind of experimenting on the kids, and that was probably not a good thing to be doing that. So we've learned a lot. But I think if you're planning to get married and have kids, you better be thinking of the whole thing. It's at least 20 years of a commitment, not just the first 5. It's the whole thing, and you have to grow with the children. Yeah, I don't know if I answered your question. I'm just talking. Did that? Yeah. Any thoughts? Yeah. You have I don't know if anybody needs a mic.
You're talking about the time of conception and the consciousness, and that is how the child develops their consciousness. So how could, if we were wanting to have a child in the future, in a few year or months or whatever it is, how could we prepare our consciousness? So
That's a good question. I suspect you know the answer to that. You're asking because you know the answer to that, right?
I'm interested to hear your answer.
Aha. Well, yeah, it's pretty straightforward that the consciousness is what you want to develop. And so it could be that if you're planning to have children in 4 or 5 years, you want to start now purifying not just your consciousness but also your body. What I learned, because there's such an emphasis on having sons, in the Indian culture, which is kind of become perverted in the sense, well, men, the idea that men make money and women don't, and girls are a burden because now they're not providers. It's kind of shifted now because the Indian women have gotten smart and they get an education so they can take care of themselves if needed. But the consciousness is super important. So chanting rounds, there's in ISKCON we do the Garbhadan Sanskara. In ancient times they had a different process, but our process is that chanting a minimum of 50 rounds before you engage in trying to conceive a child. And I would say for people who want to determine something of their gender, I've experimented with this, and I've also known other ladies who wanted to have sons or daughters or whatever. There's a whole macrobiotic things that you eat, If you want sons, the women need to eat very alkaline foods, fasting, apples, no dairy products, no fried, no sugar, and the men should be feasting, in terms of creating rakta or life energy. So there's this kind of dynamic if you want sons. Whether that matters to you, I don't know. My interest is to have a Krishna conscious, whatever it is, But I would say purifying the body is important too, because you are creating a body, and the consciousness is entering into a particular body, and you are inviting a soul from another planet probably, or some other atmosphere, who's waiting for just the right combination of husband and wife or mother and father, and the circumstances when the child takes birth. They're taking birth in a particular ethnicity, race, community, all of that is coming. And then the consciousness or the sense organs are grouped around the mind. That's based on what the consciousness is. So I would say it's a big project. If you're thinking of having kids, give yourself at least a year before you embark on that to get your head clear, prepare, get your finances organized, create a nest, like every animal makes a nest, so that it's not, the child is clearly wanted, welcomed, celebrated. Having children in Krishna consciousness is such a great gift, and not many people can do it well, but it's equal to deity worship. We do need children who are enlightened to carry on. Yeah. Anything you want to add to that? No? Yeah, Vaishnavi. This is interesting. We're not planning to have this conversation today, right?
Just on the point of having the right consciousness and everything, there is the principle of nature and nurture, because we see even Krishna in the form of Varaha with his wife, Bhumi Devi, Mother Earth. He had Narakasura, who due to bad association became demoniac. And then we see disciples of Srila Prabhupada, they may not have had a good upbringing or good consciousness of the parents, but they became elevated devotees. So that nurture and nature and association.
Yes.
So there's always hope for everyone.
Yes.
But also the ones who had a good start, good nature, there's also a risk and danger to not become complacent. And
Yes. Prabhupada said that in some of his purports, you can't, I think in the story of Maharaj Parikshit, that you really cannot become a Mahabhagavata unless you start right at the beginning of your life, just like a musician protege. So right from the conception, even in the womb, you can do an enormous amount of, before the kids can argue with you, you can read them. I read the entire Srimad Bhagavatam to Madi, who, my son Madi, who lives here. I embarked, I thought, okay, this is going to be mine. In 10 months, I'm going to have read all of Prabhupada's books. So I just would read out loud for hours. And it was funny because when he went to Gurukul, he hadn't read any of Prabhupada's books. And he went to, he was in Vrindavan Gurukul until he was, he was in Gita Nagari first. Then 7 years old, he was in Vrindavan and then Mayapur. But when he would fall asleep, the kids would get up so early in the morning, he'd be like dozing during class because they had gone to the morning program. And the teacher would kind of call on him to answer something, and he would, he'd know the answer just because I'm sure he must have internalized all that reading. It was in there somewhere because he was hearing in the womb. And how important that is. To your point also with the nature-nurture thing, Prabhupada said that a child is like a piece of dough. You can mold it, him, her, any way that you like, even if you have taken birth in a demonic family. And we see that with Prahlad Maharaj. And Prabhupada celebrate, this is why we sing this song, he celebrated, all of us were demons, we come from those homes. And but he rescued us. We made new families. The Krishna conscious community became our intentional family. And so, by association, by practice, by raising our consciousness, we can evolve beyond that. So, best to start early as possible. Yeah. Anything else? Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. We would have had a different class had he been given class. Yeah.